Hey gang, thanks for dropping by Mauricio's Crib. If this is your first time, please subscribe. Also, follow me on Instagram and on TikTok. 1989 saw the year of some of the most anticipated movies. Some of those were Tim Burton's Batman, Ghostbusters 2, The Karate Kid Part 3, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But earlier that year, in February, this little film snuck its way into theaters and it has since garnered a cult following, and that movie is The Burbs. Writer Dana Olson was originally writing the script for a TV series, but as the story progressed, he decided to change it into a feature film instead. Producer Brian Grazer optioned the script and thought about having Tom Hanks as the lead character, Ray Peterson. Dana Olson had no actors in mind when he was writing the script, so when he heard that Tom Hanks was considered for the lead role, he was overwhelmed. But at the time, there was a bit of a concern if Tom Hanks would actually do the role, because his feature film Big, which was just about to be released, was going to be exactly that. However, when Tom Hanks did read the script, he loved it and he decided to play the main character, Ray Peterson. He did have one concern, and that was he didn't want his character to be a husband and a father. He just wanted to be a husband. He was afraid of being typecast this early on in his career. Considering The Burbs was a mixture of horror, comedy, and reality, the producers tapped Joe Dante to direct the film. He was responsible for doing The Howling, Piranha, Gremlins, Explorers, and Inner Space, which all of those films were kind of offbeat in some way. Cast to play the role of Tom Hanks' wife, Carol Peterson, was Carrie Fisher. Yes, Princess Leia herself. But let's not forget that she had done other movies besides the Star Wars saga. She was in The Blues Brothers, The Man with One Red Shoe, which also starred Tom Hanks, and Amazon Women from the Moon, which was a film of short skits, and one of them was directed by Joe Dante. Just before I go on, I just want to say something about Carrie Fisher's hair in The Burbs. At the end of the film, when she comes back from the lake, Tom Hanks says to her,
"I really do like your hair."
Assuming that she's had a haircut. Now, the film was filmed in chronological order, and so to me, her hair looked the same all along. I've recently learned that she actually wore a wig the entire time that was identical to her natural hair, and which is exposed at the end of the film. So, go figure. The other cast members are Bruce Dern, who played Lieutenant Rumsfeld, a very funny performance. Wendy Shower plays his wife Bunny. Corey Feldman, who plays the teenager Ricky Butler that lives next door to them. And the Klopex family, which is the center of the story, are played by Henry Gibbons, Brother Theodore, and Courtney Gaines. Courtney Gaines, up until then, was featured in Children of the Corn and also in Can't Buy Me Love. Here's an interesting but amusing fact about Brother Theodore. He was actually hard of hearing in one ear, and a lot of the times he was missing his cues, which caused him to be frustrated.
No.
That frustration went into his character and it transcended very well on screen, and that's why he's always grumpy rubes. The hardest part to cast was that of Art, Tom Hanks' crazy neighbor. The producer saw a lot of comedic actors but just couldn't get the part right. Rick Ducommun, who was a stand-up comedian, nailed the audition. You might have seen him in Die Hard. He was the one in the manhole where Agent Johnson went up to him and said, "Lose the grid or lose your job." The Burbs was filmed entirely at the Universal Studios backlot. Mayfield Place would also be the street for Desperate Housewives many years later. And many moons before that, it was also the street where the Munsters lived, as well as the Cleaver family in Leave It to Beaver. Was it the Cleaver family? I don't think they were called Beaver. I think it was the Cleavers. I don't know. Anyway, but that's where the street, that's where they did Leave It to Beaver and the Munsters and other films as well, and also TV series as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. One thing that you can't ignore about the Burbs, and it makes the film much more appealing, is the music by composer Jerry Goldsmith. It seems like every character has their own theme, and almost every scene is defined by the score in one way or another. But one thing that Jerry Goldsmith couldn't get right was the score for where in this scene, Tom Hanks and Rick Ducommun walk up to the Klopek's house. According to director Joe Dante, he pretty much came close, but in the end, they ended up licensing the music by Ennio Morricone from the spaghetti western My Name Is Nobody. Okay, may I have a little bit of trouble saying Ennio Morricone because I really don't know how to pronounce it. You're supposed to say it in the Italian way, like Ennio Morricone, but Morricone sounds too close to another probably offensive word nowadays in Spanish, which I'm not going to say. So I gave it a shot. So there you go. The original ending had the Klopeks perceived to be something else, and that they were actually up to no good, and they actually kidnapped Tom Hanks' character, presumably to be killed. But when Tom Hanks signed on board, they changed the ending because you just don't kill Tom Hanks. Corey Feldman had a lot more screen time, but due to the rewrites, a lot of his scenes were cut, which he was quite upset about. But director Joe Dante advised him not to be upset, as he was going to have the last line in the movie, which he insisted is a great line. Corey Feldman was still not convinced until he started having people coming up to him and quoting,
God, I love this street.
The Burbs was released in February 1989, and it wasn't a box office hit, but it did moderately well considering it was made for $18 million and ended up making almost $50 million. What could have stalled the success of the film was the unfair comparison to Big. But needless to say, even though the film did fly under the radar back then, it has since had a cult following. Joe Dante was actually unaware how much of a following the Burbs has, because every film festival or convention he attended to, it was always about Gremlins. So there you have it, gang, another talk on an 80s movie. Thank you so much for dropping by Mauricio's crib. Please subscribe so you get a notification when the next video is up. Until the next one, I'm actually going to do, no, I'm not going to say, the usual thing what I say, but every neighborhood has something weird going on that nobody knows about. Do you know what's going on in your neighborhood?